Mr. Genghis Reddy is the managing director of Blue Drop Enviro Private Limited, a mechanical engineer by education with over 19 years of industrial experience and a decade of overseas work experience in the US. He leads the company's strategic growth. He focuses on the unique needs and challenges of customers in specific industry verticals. He actively works on expanding digital marketing efforts, building commercial excellence, developing key account management capabilities, and integrating IT efforts to accelerate delivery capabilities.
We'll cover some of the basics so we are all on the same page, and from there we can move forward to the technical aspects of nature-based solutions. We all know that this is where the origin of wastewater is in a domestic scenario, that we use water for various purposes, and they have all kinds of waste in this water. There are organic waste, hydrocarbons, fats, oils, fecal matter, and whatnot. Apart from the domestic waste, we are very familiar with how much we generate through our industrialization. The rapid industrialization urbanization has created very many facilities that produce all kinds of waste, part of which is solid waste, and other waste is water waste and chemical waste. When it comes to the industrial waste generation, the pollutants are very toxic and can be very damaging to the environment unless they are treated. And it is said through various surveys that we are not handling at least about 30 to 40% of this wastewater that is getting generated. It doesn't mean that the rest of it getting treated or otherwise, but the surveys say that the systems have been set up to treat the wastewaters. How effective, how much they are treating, how much of monitoring is being done is another question. So apart from the domestic and industries, there are other social avenues where we create wastewater through various activities. It's not an uncommon scenario to see some of the lakes that got polluted and the side effects of those. And this often takes headlines in our newspapers and media channels about some lake or other area, giving out certain scenarios like this where frothing is seen. Environmental laws certainly tells us that the wastewater must be treated so that it meets the necessary COD standards and ammonium nitrates, etc., etc. It is not only a legal requirement, I would say it is a moral requirement that whatever we do, like we clean our homes, we use our homes, we clean our homes, our offices, our workspaces they get cleaned. So whatever we use, we have been using them for so that our quality of life is better. Yes, that we use when it wastewater, there is a need and responsibility to clean that waste where it will be reused for other purposes. Even if you don't reuse, when we are discharging it, it is our moral responsibility that we leave the environment the way we found it. We use that. There have been a lot of different technologies that have been deployed since decades for wastewater treatment. Some of them are listed here. Many of us who are dealing with the wastewater have been familiar with the technologies like MBBS, BR, MBR, and the conventional active discharge process or extended aeration, etc. And there have been several different kinds of chemical treatments that we deploy to treat industrial wastewaters when the toxic content is high. Also, since over a decade, or I would say that biological treatment systems that have emerged, not that they were not there before, but there have been more technology being introduced. But the success rate has been questionable because of the reliability of these technologies and the behaviors of these microbes and bacterial elements that actually are the source of this wastewater. We keep on investigating the possibilities because the biological treatment cost based on microbial treatment. There have been several installations of electrocoagulation, and they're dependent on the energy requirement. So we have developed in, but many have been import adapted that have been developed abroad. Has been significant. The design has been appropriate, and not only the design but the implementation and further operations and maintenance. So these are the conventional systems, and there are much to it. As we go through this presentation, we'll learn more about it. Some of the facilities look like this, and these are some of the facilities I personally have visited. Not all of them, but most of them, from various parts of the country. So facilities being exposed to ambient air as the water is being treated. They have been addressing the problem, but not in a holistic way. Why would I say that these are addressing the problem but not in a holistic way? When we say holistic, means it has a complete sum and substance of handling the pollution from all sides and not creating a secondary pollution. Let's look at why this statement and what are the basis for all these deliberations. The real concerns here are that been setting up these conventional treatment systems for a long time. We found upon investigation, personally, I visited treatment plants across the country, set up by various government institutions, private institutions, and residential housing colonies, etc. A lot of places I found systems are not functioning properly, or systems are not set up properly, or rather, I would say a lot of the systems are not being operated well. What are the reasons? Some of them are financial reasons, others are operation maintenance, and well, we'll look at what are the real concerns that we need to be mindful of in selecting a system or deploying a system or going with this system to treat the wastewaters. The first and foremost question is, India being a developing country still, we always have this primary concern of how much does it cost. But a lot of people do stop at the point where how much am I paying to set up the system, the capital cost. But rarely people do ask about the total cost of ownership. I often quote this that if you build a home with ₹1 crore, to maintain it for 20 years, how much does it cost? Maybe an additional of 5 to 10 lakhs to fix your tiles, broken tiles, and plumbing lines, or some electrical failures, or probably a couple of coats of paint. So for ₹1 crore of home, you add 10 lakhs for its maintenance, it's about 1 crore 10 lakhs for a 15 or 20 year term. But when it comes to STP, it's not the case. You set up an STP or ETP for any facility, whether hospital or a medical facility or a university or a township or an industry, the capital cost may be ₹1 crore, but the operations and maintenance cost is far exorbitant. Some of the numbers I can share later. This can go up to 4 to 5 times of your capital cost, meaning you may be spending nearly 4 to 5 crores in a 20-year time to just operate and maintain this system, whatever you have set up for the ₹1 crore. If that is not taken into consideration, then people would find it difficult to source funds, and obviously they take shortcuts to not maintain it. And then the question of, what is the effective life of your treatment system? Typical to in a case of building a home, we build the home for a lifetime, which means that it actually caters to 2 or 3 generations that without having to do much. But here, the effective life of a treatment system often found to be 10 years, 15 years, and not more than that. In many of the systems we have seen, and a lot of people who are from the industry do acknowledge that a lot of systems really require overhaul in 7 to 8 years time. And very rarely we see systems running for 15 years. And if you have been running a system for 15 years, which means that you've been operating it very well and you've been taking care of the system quite well. When you take care of the system quite well and operate it very well, it has its own costs that become far higher than what I mentioned before. So the financial impact of setting up systems need to be understood very well ahead of time, so the appropriate budgeting can be done, and also evaluation can be done whether there are any alternatives that can give you a better treatment system at a lower cost. Then comes this operations and maintenance. Where are these costs coming from? When you derive the financial costs, move them into operations and maintenance. One is the cost factor, second is the work factor. If the system frequently gives repairs and maintenance, what do? Your staff is busy, constantly maintaining, repairing the broken parts or pieces, whatever, fixing them and constantly replenishing them. And can you afford those breakdown of the system? It's not about a financial situation. It's about you have collected all your wastewater into a place and you are trying to treat it. But the treatment system breaks down. Now, can you afford if the system does not work for a day? What happens to your wastewater? If we do not have water for wash or water for drinking, there are provisions that you can go buy drinking water from somewhere, or you can probably skip a shower, not cook food at home or not wash clothes at home. That can be done. But if the shit doesn't flow forward and it starts to throw all kinds of, obnoxious odors and smell, what will you do with that? So honestly, none of us can afford an operational treatment system breaking down. It has to be functional at all the time, 7 by 24, 365 days. Then comes how appropriate are these systems institutionally? And what is the skill level required to operate a system? And does your system cause objectionable orders while it operates? I'm not talking about when it's under repair and maintenance, but regularly, does it have objectionable orders and can you handle it? Is it required to, go with systems unmindful of their operational challenges? When I mean institutionally appropriate, you're setting up systems to treat the wastewater and it requires all these kinds of operations maintenance, people who are experts at it, and it may have noise, it may have orders. So for the ambience that you're setting up, some of the people I've seen setting up for lake rejuvenation, they want to treat the wastewater and they're setting up MBBR, SBR systems and other conventional systems. Is it really befitting being institutionally appropriate for a lake scenario where you want to set up a lot of electromechanical equipment while the whole setting is a natural system where there are birds and butterflies and natural ecosystem is flourishing where you set up a lot of machinery? Probably not. So that's what I mean by institutionally being appropriate when you set up system. Then the last but not the least factor is environment. Often it is missed out by a lot of these consultants who are recommending treatment systems, whether it is an STP is environment friendly. People look at pocket friendly, or maybe people look at easy to maintain, but not necessarily looking at environmental impact. Every sewage treatment plant has its own carbon footprint. In which way? There are several ways to look at it. The primary reason for a heavy carbon footprint with a treatment system, whether it's STP or ETP, is your energy that it is consuming. A lot of these treatment systems are heavy energy guzzlers and they do require heavy amount of energy, and most of the energy today still comes from fossil fuels, which means that for every unit that we are using in our treatment system, somewhere else we are burning coal. And also the NGT has been revising the norms to protect our water bodies and farmlands and things like that, not causing secondary pollution and other side effects. So they've been modifying the norms for treatment. When you set up a system, can you alter the system's efficiency or improve it as you go if the norms change? Is your system so flexible? And then finally, how safe is your treated water for reuse? This has been published in newspapers many where that, in Ganga region, some of the news came out that the fish is dying. Why? Even after setting up treatment systems, I'm not commenting about any specific situation, but generally when your treated water is not safe for reuse or release, which means that it has excess chlorine content or it has unresolved compounds still in it, or in a case where we're talking about the medical and hospital facilities, how safe is the treated water? Unless we really evaluate these things and design a treatment system, we often may encounter challenges in real life and may have to shell out a lot of money and also let go a peace of mind. So combining this is what brings the sustainability matrix. They have to be economically viable, they have to be socially acceptable, they have to be technically, institutionally appropriate, and they must protect the environment and natural resources. Only then a system can be called a sustainable system. People talk about green technology. The definition misses out, our general understanding. So green technology, we think it's environment friendly, but there are definitions about what it does actually mean. So it reads that technology whose use is intended to mitigate reverse effects of human activity on the environment. That's a green technology. And green tech refers to technology that is considered environment friendly based on the three things: the production, the process, and supply chain. Production process, we understand. Supply chain, some of us miss. If you are bringing material that is required for Bombay, let's say we are bringing the material from Kolkata, the material has traveled all the way, thousands of kilometers to reach its destination. The entire supply chain has to be monitored to see what secondary pollution are we creating by transporting using the diesel-run vehicles, things like that. Of course, the primary focus has to be on the production and processes, whether they are environment friendly and what side effects they are having on the environment. Just when it comes to sewage treatment plants, we talk about footprint, the system requiring space and all that. Often we miss out this factor that, well, we are treating the wastewater, but a lot of the systems do create sludge, heavy amount of sludge in some cases. So what are we doing with this sludge? How safe is this sludge? If this is not a safe sludge, what are you doing with that? We are sending it into landfill or dumping it somewhere. So while treating this wastewater, we have created a secondary pollutant or byproduct that again has to be resolved at a different place, which has its own footprint and costs. Not only to dump it or store it or dispose it, but also the transportation that it gets involved with. So people have drawn their inspiration from nature and came out with nature-based solutions. And what you are seeing are natural wetlands at the top that have been there since ages in different places. Of course, we do not find these now as much as we used to find them before, because shallow water bodies have been cobjified. Rapid urbanization has caused shrinking of water bodies, which is a common experience across the country, that we don't see shallow water bodies in most places. And these aquatic species of plant that used to grow in the shallow water bodies do not find their bearings, because they don't find the shallow bodies where they can take birth. So while these water bodies had these aquatic plants, if we have actually gone closer and observed, what's happening at the root system, what's happening, what kind of reactions are happening, and sometimes you find bubbles coming up from the bottom of these water bodies. Need not be poisonous gases. In many cases, they can be the oxygen released by the roots of these aquatic plants. What we have been achieving through conventional systems of providing oxygen in the water, these systems could provide the oxygen naturally, not through air, but they can give nascent oxygen at the root system. So such systems have been derived from inspiration from the nature. They have been deployed widely across the world. Early adopters have been the European countries and the Americans. These systems have been in place for 40, 50 years in various of these countries. And the science has so much developed since the time that it was deployed, that the footprint has been augmented, by reducing the footprint, and treatment capacities have been augmented. And these solutions have been widely deployed to treat various kinds of wastewaters, just not the domestic wastewaters. So some of the images below are systems that we have set up in Hyderabad. What are these systems? What are called? They're called constructed wetlands, or they can be called as phytoremediation systems. They mimic the natural functionality of the nature by in regenerating the water. They are known as Earth's kidneys. They filter impurities, pollutants from our waterways. These constructed wetland systems can be defined as simply an oxygen supplying biological engines. Oxygen supplying biological engines, biological, which means that they have certain kinds of bacteria and microorganisms that can actually break down the waste and then resolve them. So these systems can be used for all domestic, municipal, and industrial wastewater treatment. So there are other advanced systems called aerated wetlands. They're very advanced and they're robust treatment engines. The image in the middle, you can see the inlet water and outlet water, which means that these natural systems can actually be deployed to treat very strong, high strength wastewaters also. Chemical composition needs to be evaluated, but they can be deployed. That's what this image conveys to us. This is one of the person that is in construct wetlands expert from Denmark who has visited India. Seen some of the system. This fellow has built little more than 1100 constructed wetland systems in Denmark and some other countries around. And they are very keen to give their knowledge and experience in what they've been doing for the past 25, 30 years, which we have been widely using in systems that we are building in India. There are types of passive wetlands and there are advanced aerated wetlands. The aerated wetlands have their own advantages over passive wetlands, which we can see later. What can be adopted for various applications, including hospitals and medical facilities. The natural biological systems, are part of that is constructed wetlands. There can be other NBS systems, natural biological systems, but what we deal are with the constructed wetlands. There are several different distinct advantages of how, based on how they function, what they require, and what they deliver. Most of these are very natural systems, and aerated wetlands can be slightly advanced with using very minimal power compared to a passive system. These systems do not require any kind of chemicals as coagulants. The sludge is generally consumed, any organic sludge is getting consumed in the system itself, so you don't have to do the sludge handling. Their maintenance cost is low to medium. It doesn't require any high-tech people to maintain it. Non-skilled people can be, semi-skilled people can comfortably maintain it, and they don't have any repairs maintenance scenario. Very minimal once in a while. If the system is well designed and all provisions are made, you don't have to deal with the repairs and maintenance that often. Yes, there is maintenance that needs to be addressed once in a while, and experts have to keep an eye on the system of its functionality in general to see how the plant health is and all that. But otherwise, there is no significant cost around it. There is no significant deployment of resource around it. It doesn't break down. Effective life can be far beyond 30 years, although we say it as 25 to 30 years. Land requirement is, yes, it is higher in some cases, but it has to be compared on case-to-case basis. They look like parks, so they're clean and green, and their performance actually improves with age because the root system establishes very, very well, and then it can handle high strength waters as the plants grow. Recogeneration is very much a default feature of these constructed wetland systems, and they can handle nutrients very efficiently. We do not have to set separate nutrient handling systems when you're deploying natural biological systems. Carbon footprint is extremely minimal, and you can get substantial carbon credits. And when it comes to disinfection, this has been a proven factor that when you're disinfecting the wastewater as a tertiary treatment to kill pathogens, if a similar conventional system has been deployed, it may require about 4 to 6 ppm to disinfect, but a constructed wetland system need not have such a heavy dosing of chlorine. 1 ppm is more than enough to take care of it, because there are kinds of humic acids, etc. They form within the wetlands, and some of the microorganisms that get evolved in wetlands, they themselves act as anti-pathogen systems, that they actually disinfect the system. That's why you don't find as much of a fecal coliforms, in the residual, in the treated water. And many of the systems that we have deployed, we have not put any sand carbon filter, we have not deployed chlorine. If you're giving it for garden, they're reasonably safe. But when it comes to hospitals and medical facilities, we need to be careful now, given that the presence of SARS in the treated wastewaters is found. Not treated wastewaters, they have been saying that it is being found in wastewaters. Obviously, if you don't have a mechanism that to effectively kill that presence of virus, you may be potentially transferring that risk to further down into any place where you're using the treated water. That has to be looked at very carefully. So aerated wetland systems and the natural biological systems can be set up for residential, commercial, recreation, all kinds of wherever there is water, you have to do a water analysis and see if there are any non-biodegradable components in that. We have to have a methodical plan to adopt these systems for various of the requirements. Central Pollution Control Board has been recommending left, right, center, since a long time, since 2001. They published a book in 2001 saying that the disposal of untreated urban wastewater has been a major cause of water pollution in India. Strategies for control of water pollution caused by municipal wastewater have focused mainly on implementation of expensive and energy-intensive conventional treatment systems. The limited successes of these strategies can be attributed to the high capital investment, continual replacement, and ongoing operation costs of these concrete and steel facilities, which often goes beyond the financial grasp of most of our towns and cities. The criticality of cost-effective, appropriate wastewater treatment technologies for water pollution control in our country, hence, needs no emphasis. In recent years, constructed wetland systems have emerged as a low-cost, high-performing wastewater treatment technology in many European and American countries. This they have said in 2001. It's 20 years ago. So, but the adoption of these systems has not been prevalent because of lack of awareness and lack of number of private or public organizations that are taking up deploying this system. There are very few companies that are doing this in our country. That also is a reason, because probably these systems may not have a lot of profits involved in it. Maybe that's why a lot of people do not adopt, and this also requires quite a bit of experience in deploying these systems. Although they look simple, the science is reasonably complex, but you have to handle it well. The treatment operation of the system is very simple, but setting up the system requires a thorough investigation of the design principles. Probably some of these reasons have prevented it widespreading, but now more and more people are adopting it. I draw this analogy of aerated wetlands versus passive wetlands. We have been recommending aerated wetlands for all kinds of facilities that it can reduce the footprint of a natural biological system, and also it can be more effective when it comes to ammonium nitrates and things like that. Under design systems, we have seen many systems where they choke and clog, and they also can throw a lot of challenges when it comes to reduce footprint. People, if they did not understand what it requires to resolve certain level of BOD, if you design a system with X footprint where BOD inlet is 150, where BOD inlet is 350. I've seen people deploying the same footprint for various BODs. It doesn't work like that. Obviously, the system has to be well designed. The basin sizes have to be calculated based on the inlet characteristics of the water. Poorly designed systems do throw challenges. And when you deploy aerated wetland systems, you can augment the life of the system pretty well. This we have been seeing with the implementations across the world that we have investigated. So just to give you some glance of how the systems would look like, these are 3D images. There is a collection tank, and there is of course a screening before the collection tank, and there is a pumping station, because sometimes you don't get the water at a level that you would like to build this system. So the invert levels are way below the grounds. You may have to pump it into the holding tank and see that the entire flow goes in a gravitational flow. So you don't have to incur a lot of energy costs for further pumping. These are some of the systems we have built look like. This is an Ala Municipal Nala, and this is a University of Hyderabad, where we have a life sciences building, where all the water from the canteen, kitchen, toilets, and the laboratories in the life sciences, they all come here. And the system has been beautifully developed. You can see the image, how it looks like. This is one in Jodhpur ICSA Foundation. It's a 20 KLD system. This is a rural self-employment training institute where a lot of candidates are getting trained to seeking employment. All the wastewater comes into this 20 KLD system, and the system is functioning beautifully. This is another very popular case which we have presented in Denmark, in the wet pole in 2019. This system caters to 14 different kinds of industries. Their common effluents come here, and we built this system with very large footprint, because the kind of inlet parameters did require a larger footprint. But the system has been successfully treating the wastewater. A very unique case study of a CETP. This is another case where an Nala was passing by this industry. We have intervened and interjected, did the interception and diversion of this entire wastewater into a collection tank, then developed aerated wetlands. It produces ultra clean treated water, which is being used for their process purposes as well for gardening. This is another case, where 150 KLD conventional system was existent for a long time and that defunct. Then they called us to, they were interested in exploring nature solutions, that they wanted to have more greenery. It's like actually golf course. So we used their existing tanks and deployed aerated wetlands in a very small footprint. Now the system delivers very good water that they use it for their golf course and other purposes. There is another case study where we have deployed a 2.4 MLD aerated wetland system where we had a 1.2 MLD passive wetland system before in this place. This place has a couple of thousand people in a normal day and can scale up to 30-40,000 people for 3-4 days where large spiritual congregations are organized. So this the requirement was that the system must scale up from 2,000 people scenario to a 20,000 people scenario in no time. So we have built the system on the principles of that flexible operation where it will work even if there's a 200 KLD inflow, it will work even if it has 2.4 MLD inflow. So how we have designed the system, we can discuss the technical details with those who are interested in it. But this is one of the unique system that has been built in about 70 days, 70 calendar days actually. And it's functional very beautifully. So these designs can be very aesthetic, taking the inspiration from the nature. Wetlands are known to be kidneys of nature, what we discussed before. So we formed these wetlands in kidney shape, and we have done entire hydraulics and the system design as per the shape that we required. So these are other designs that you can deploy. This is I have given it for one of the railways. This is for another film city. So I mean, nature has its own beauty. When you deploy gardens and plants, we can make it more beautiful. So the designs can be done, but you have to be careful about how do you design your hydraulics to match with such designs where the distribution and collection is not affected because of dead pockets of wetland area that can affect the system performance. So a lot of care has to be exhibited in designing these systems. This is a case where there's no space left, and they said we barely have any space. How do you do it? So we do a G+1. We have a holding tank and a wetland at the bottom, and we have a wetland at the top, and there is a small electromechanical component room for a small blower and pumping station. So a variety of ways you can design the systems to meet the requirements. And this, if you can see this is a case where we were asked to design a system for lake where the influent is coming in from different sites. We intervened and we collected. We formed a collection ring where entire sewage is captured into that, and then it led into wetland system, and the wetlands treat it and then discharge it into the lake. This project was not complete because of some local issues, but these wetland system, you can imagine how the lake would look when you deployed a wetland system to treat the wastewater. Now it becomes a very natural part of the lake. So we do deploy these aerated wetlands as well, the floating wetlands, because the floating wetlands do contribute to the polishing of the water. They cannot regenerate just by themselves to a level that we require. But certainly, once you treat the water, they can maintain the water. They can treat the water to some extent, but not completely. So now we come to the pandemic and antimicrobial resistance, and so what happens in this scenario? All of us are familiar with the drugs that we have been consuming. If you look back at the history since 15-20 years, it's the same drug in a different patches supply, and the primary composition has been similar. So when we consume them, the excreta, the urination, and all that goes into the wastewater, and these wastewaters get collected somewhere, or fortunately, if the systems are in place, yes, they go to the treatment system. If the treatment systems are not in place, they end up going into water bodies or nalas, or and then reaching finally the rivers and oceans. Obviously, the residuals that are there, they continue to be there in these waters, and they can cause havoc when the critical masses arrive. So a lot of advice has been given in the recent past, especially after the outbreak of the pandemic, to watch out on what's happening with your wastewaters. And I do not know how many people have really paid attention to what has to be done to this. So this cycle is known to us that we consume and then we defecate and then it goes into contact. And also in especially in hospitals and medical facilities, we tend to use a lot of those drugs and medication, and then whatever gets in contact with the water or solid waste is a different scenario. But whatever gets in contact when we wash our hands or when we wash the vessels or whatever we do with whatever has gotten in contact with the infected patients and the drugs. So naturally, all these things are weren't part of any domestic system usually, but in these medical facilities, hospitals, all these waters go run into these treatment facilities. Wherever you are collecting this water, what do you do with it? What things can you do differently? And when it comes to natural biological systems, how do we handle it? Do we have to do anything different? What are the impacts of it? How does the design has to change? These are all the questions people have asked me in the past. I do not find any greater change in the way we design the systems, but we certainly are cautious about deploying additional care in treating the water, especially when we look at let's look at the problem statement here, that with the growing concerns in the environmental concentrations of antibiotics, they talk about this very specifically in very many publications, that these antibiotics exert a selective pressure on clinically relevant bacteria. For the control of such acute strains, there is a need for a major shift toward a localized management of the water cycle. So this localized management is what we have to pay extreme attention to, how we are handling the system, in what way we have to care for, and what additional things we have to do. So the monitoring systems, we have to constantly test these waters, that we are treating, for the presence of residuals and that antimicro, resistance strains. That is very important for us to test. It is for just information, so we can act on it. General recommendations have been here that we should avoid any direct contact with the waste or wastewater during this treatment process, given that there is evidence of presence of these viruses and bacteria. Where do you get in contact with this waste or wastewater during treatment? Yes, this one point is where common human intervention is bar screen chambers, where the solid waste gets accumulated. You have to clear the bar screen chambers, and people do tend to get in contact with that in removing that scavenging. See, the manual scavenging is still in place in many systems, because for smaller systems, people are not deploying automated bar screen mechanisms. So they manually scavenge to clear the screens, and that's where you have potential risk. So we have to have all necessary care taken at that point. And then the second point is, when you deploy systems, I have seen this with many conventional systems where the water is exposed to environment, ambient air. This is, I have shown pictures earlier, that every time the water comes and gets collected and you give aeration, if the tank is not closed, now potentially you're exposing whatever you're exposing to the ambient air. So try to see that your treatment tanks are closed, and you select systems that do not require such open tanks. This would help in a overall healthiness of that environment wherever you're deploying the systems. If you're deploying these systems in basements, where I've seen that in basements, one of the pictures I've shown had an open top, and it's not a very healthy environment. One is the production of release of methane into that basement area. Other is given the special circumstances, we want to be when the diseases are airborne, how much care we have to exhibit in in designing such systems and establishing such systems. And always make sure that this water is not directly going into any water streams, or it is not going into the soil before it is well disinfected. So if there are presence of these pathogens and viruses and all kinds of things in there, we have been recommending to use ozonation, a thorough ozonation of this treated water, whatever volume it may be. That will ensure that nothing biologically is present that can come to the downstreams or the soil or any person or any animal that gets in contact with this wastewater downstream. So these are some of the practices that we would recommend. As far as constructed wetlands and natural biological systems are concerned, a heavy amount of research has been done on what's happening in the system when such wastewaters gets in contact with the root zone. It's a constructed wetland system is a very complex system at the root zone. Not about complexity of we building or we operating it, but the reactions that take place and the kind of microbial growth that is there. So there are very many kinds of life cycles that are there within the wetlands, and that the different kinds of microorganisms get generated. They produce Some of them offset some of the pathogens. Some of them can cause evolve into a different kind of microbe biological system altogether. But so long as this water is not directly let into any water body, so long as this water is not getting in contact, getting in contact with this wastewater, we are safe, because all the reactions that happen in the root zone remain at the root zone and they do not necessarily go out of. That's why we have never adopted in India, except for one case, we have never adopted surface flow wetland systems. We always have gone with subsurface flow, that there is no drop of water that is exposed to ambient air. Always you find the wastewater at least a few inches below the surface, that you never see in the wastewater getting in contact with environment around. So some of this care has to be exhibited. Well, apart from that, it's about our company, what we do, etc. We have been. I just want to introduce this person. This person is Scott Wallace, and this is Rene Killian. This is the inventor of aerated wetlands. He has been to India. He has met with some of our ministries and all that. He has deployed very complex systems across the world. He has built more than 250 systems, and Rene has built, as I said before, more than 1,000 systems. These guys are experts in this industry. We always get to learn from them because they have seen the life cycle of these systems for beyond 25, 30 years. So in India, we have been practicing this wetland systems since about a decade or more than a decade. But I have not seen constructed wetland systems well designed, well engineered, which has been functioning for that long time. There may be a few systems I may not have seen, but majority of the system, the age is below 10 years, and a lot of systems I have seen have been in trouble after a certain time. It's an evolving science. People are adopting it. We have been very careful about the designs we do. So we learn a lot from these people who have been seeing these systems and their evolution and their performance beyond 15, 20 years. So we get to implement some of the techniques and intricacies that become part of the design as you learn. So we are associated with various wetland associations, technical associations across the world. We have developed our own patent around this. So generally, we have been recommending people that pick up technologies that are environment friendly. That's a very important thing. Pick up technologies that are economical on a long run, that will help you sustain a system economically, and pick up systems that do not create secondary pollution or create a need to handle sludge and things like that. Also focus on the systems that doesn't take babysitting all the time, which is the case with many systems, that you have to monitor them every day. If your technicians are off for 3 days, you don't know what's happening with your system. So go with as much as you can, and it has its own downside of asking for some level of footprint. Not in every case you have a problem, but you evaluate natural systems before you choose conventional systems. And in this special times of pandemic, the recommendation is pay attention to the discharge, where your treated water is going, and you make sure you do constant tests on this treated water to evaluate the presence of any disinfecting pathogens in the water. So a lot more can be spoken about, but I would say for now, this is all I can share with you in the given time. Anyone interested in learning more about this subject can always get in contact with us. I'll be very happy to engage with you in discussing and knowledge sharing, and also guiding you on certain things. Then I'm sure there are more experts around this subject. I only share from what I've seen, what we have practiced, and my views are my personal learnings. So thank you very much for listening to me patiently. I would like to show you a video of one of the systems that we have built. It's not a professional video. It's a shot from mobile, and I gave just a voiceover in my office, so you can watch it, and that would be the end of this presentation. So thank you for your patient listening and understanding. Any suggestions? If I missed out anything, please do write to me. My contact information can be shared at the end of the session. We would like to learn, explore, and continue to build better systems for the benefit of everybody, and learn from each other so we all benefit. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Blue Drop Enviro. I'm going to take you through a live video of one of our sewage treatment plants in Hyderabad. You can see the wastewater coming in from various sources into this holding tank. This holding tank is designed specifically for sewage treatment functionality through constructed wetlands. Here you can see the first basin of the constructed wetlands having healthy plants, and they have grown close to about 9 feet tall. These are surface ponds. You must be wondering why this is gravel. What is this liner? See, the whole principle is that this wastewater shouldn't get in touch with any soil, so causing soil pollution. So we line these surface ponds designed for the wetlands with HDP liners and geotextile liners. And the entire hydrology is designed based on the pollutant level within the wastewater. You can see the extent of treatment plant. There are various sections of different plantation you can see. Anybody passing by probably feel that this is a park, may not even notice that there is something happening at the root zone. Entire action happens at the root zone of this treatment plant. These plants are aquatic plants. You can see the tubular structure of this stem. The paper manufacturing was produced out of these papyrus plants in the olden days. So the gravel is installed in different layers ranging from 10 mm to 60 mm, and the entire hydrology design on the pipelines are laid below the gravel, and various species of plantation is done. The way these plants are thriving, if you take the same plant and plant it over a ground in soil, it wouldn't grow this much. These plants thrive on these pollutants that we don't like. Well, they are thriving, but at the same time, they are remediating the water. In this constructed wetlands, we don't separate the waste from the water. We actually remediate the waste. The sludge is consumed in the holding tank partially, and at the root zone system of these plants, there are microbial colonies that develop and they proliferate significantly. And we provide a large surface area for these microbes to encroach on. That's where the pollutants settle, and then the microbes act on them. And the roots are so well established in this gravel that there's a microfiber root system that develops at the root zone. This is a Canna species plant. You can see the flowering. So while I was describing this root system, at the root, these plants release hydroxyl ions, nascent oxygen available. That's where the majority of the water remediation happens, along with the microbial action. And you can see the output quality of water. It's odor-free, color-free, and meets the PCB norms any day. The BOD levels are way below 30s and COD are below 100. In this system, we have never used any chemicals. There is no mechanical equipment present, and you don't need any technical people here. So a lot more can be spoken about this, but in want of time, I would conclude that this is the most natural way of treatment, and this is sustainable, economical. It brings a lot of biodiversity and ecological balance together while treating the water, which is the primary cause. Thank you for watching this video. Any questions, please contact us to take it forward. Thank you.